Welcome back. We've officially finished the desktop version of our site. How are you feeling so far? Now it's time to learn how to optimize our site for the lower breakpoints, ensuring your site is fully responsive. Let's dive right in. Now that the desktop version of our site is complete, let's check out the other breakpoints to make sure our site is optimized. At the top of the screen, let's start with the tablet breakpoint. The first thing that we'll notice is that the navigation menu has switched from a navigation bar to a hamburger menu. By clicking on the hamburger menu, we can choose layout and switch it back to the navigation bar if that's what we decided we wanted to do for this breakpoint. On our site, I think we'll keep it a hamburger menu on the lower breakpoints and see what other customizations we can do. In the top right hand corner, let's hit undo until we get back to that hamburger menu. Now, with the menu selected, let's select Edit Menu from the floating white toolbar. This will bring up our hamburger menu container. You'll notice that you don't see the navigation items. It's because we changed the font colors to white. So let's switch that for these lower breakpoints. We'll select the hamburger menu content, and then we'll open up the inspector panel. We'll scroll down to text and make sure that it's set to black. Just like before, we need to make sure that we set the other states, like hover, we'll change to black, and selected will also change to black. That way we always see the menu items. Now we can hit done at the bottom of the screen. We can change the icon's color and size back in the inspector panel. We'll make sure that we have the menu selected, go to the inspector panel, and down to icon. Here we can change the size and color of the icon. We'll change the icon to white and then change its size to something smaller. The next thing you may notice is the size of the header. By selecting the header, we can see the responsive behavior was set at fixed height, so it's always going to be this 90 pixels on all breakpoints. To change the size of it on this breakpoint, we can simply grab the bottom of the header and drag it larger or smaller. But you'll notice if we go too small, it doesn't allow us to make it that size. This is because our business name. If we select our business name, we see that the responsive behavior was set to hug, which is causing on this breakpoint to have this extra space. If we go to the inspector panel and switch it to a different scale behavior, like scale proportionally, you see that it allows the header to get smaller. If we check back to the desktop breakpoint, you'll notice that the business name is still set to hug. This is because of the cascading rule. Whatever we do on the tablet breakpoint will not affect the desktop breakpoint, but it will affect the mobile breakpoint, which we'll see in just a moment. Back in the tablet breakpoint, let's see what else we need to change. You'll notice that our call to action button is a little large, so let's select it. Here, again, it's set to fixed. We don't have to change the responsive behavior, we can just scale it down by grabbing the corner and making it smaller. Then we can adjust the icon size as before in the inspector panel. This is a great time to introduce you to something called overrides. Anytime we make an adjustment on an element on a lower breakpoint, without first doing it on the higher breakpoints, we create what's called an override. Any element with an override stops the cascading rule from applying to that specific element. So for example, with the button selected, let's go to the top of the inspector panel and align it to the right. Now you see that the button has aligned itself to the right inside the stack. Now if we go back to the desktop, we'll see that the button is still in the center. This is because of the cascading rule. However, if on the desktop, we align this button to the left, it should also be aligned to the left on the lower breakpoints. However, when we go to tablet, you'll see it's still on the right. This is because of the override. Now, anything done to this element on the higher breakpoints will not affect it on this breakpoint. To remove an override on any specific element, let's open up the layers panel, go to that element, click the three dots, and select Remove Overrides. Now you'll see the button aligns itself to the left to follow the higher breakpoints. Let's go back to the desktop breakpoint and align the button back to the center. Now when we go to tablet, it'll be back in the center. But again, we want to scale it down a little bit. This will cause an override, but that's okay, as long as we're aware that it's happening. We'll scale down the button, then we'll go back to the inspector panel and scale down the size of the icon. Further down the page, let's check out the About Us section. Our paragraph text is starting to get a little small. You'll notice if we select it in the inspector panel, it is scaled down to 9 pixels. This is because the responsive behavior is set to scale proportionally. So if we go back to the desktop, we can see that it's set to scale proportionally at 16 pixels. And now, as we go to the lower breakpoints, it's going to start scaling down. The way that we can control it from getting too small on the lower breakpoints is starting on the desktop breakpoint and setting the maximum and minimum whenever we're using a scaling behavior like scale proportionally. So let's add in a 12 pixel minimum size. Now, if we go back to tablet, you'll see that the text is a little larger. And if we check the inspector panel, it's only gone down to 12. Once it hits 12, it'll no longer scale down, it'll create more space it needs to fit all the text while keeping it at 12 pixels. If we go farther down to our services section, we'll see that the descriptions here have also gotten too small. So let's click in and select this text. We could do the same thing by setting the minimum and maximum, or we can create an override by just scaling up the text and making it as large as we need. Because this is a repeater, remember it'll change all of the different items, and it'll continue to scale up and down from this point. We can grab the resize handles and check out how it's scaling. Now that everything looks optimized on our tablet breakpoint, the last thing we'll do is jump down to mobile. Back at the top, let's click on the mobile breakpoint. From here, you'll see we need to make a few more adjustments. The first thing we'll do is make the top section a little longer by grabbing the bottom and stretching it out. This will give us more room in this section. We can then select our stack and align it back to horizontal center and vertical center. Because we made the changes to our header on tablet, we'll see that those changes have also moved down to mobile. Now this header is set to a fixed height, still at 55 pixels, instead of the 90 on the desktop version. Again, we'll leave the header at this size, but let's adjust the business name. From the layers panel, let's click on the stack. Then, let's align it to vertical center. Now, in the layers panel again, let's click on the shape. We can grab the lower corner and scale it up. Now let's click on the business name and do the same. We'll scale it up by grabbing the corners. Now by selecting the stack, we'll have our spacing line again that we can adjust. If we want to adjust the size of the button for mobile, let's do it just like we did for tablet. We'll click on the button and scale it down a little bit. Now, let's align it back to horizontal center. Then, in the inspector panel, let's go down to icon and change the size of the icon a little bit smaller. Now, by using the breadcrumbs, let's select the stack. We'll grab the stack and bring it down to make it more in the middle of the section. As we scroll down the site, let's work on this About Us section. Because we made this section in 3 different cells, we can change up the layout to optimize it better for mobile. By selecting the section, we'll have the option in this floating white bar to change it from collage to rows. Now, all 3 cells will be stacked on top of each other, and we can make any adjustments we need for this specific layout. By hovering over the line between the top 2 cells, we can adjust the proportions of this top cell by dragging up. Now, if we want to make the About Us a little larger, we can do any of the options that we learned before. We could go back to desktop and set the maximum or minimum, or we could just scale this up from this breakpoint. If you decide that you want to change the order of these cells, you can simply click on one cell, hold down Shift, select another cell, and then you'll have this option to swap. When we hit swap, it swaps the content from each of the cells, and then we can make any adjustments we need. By hovering over this line, we can then bring this one smaller again. If we'd like to make the text fill the space a little better, we can grab the text box and stretch it to the right. Now we can adjust the size again. If we check back on the tablet breakpoint, you'll see that these changes have not affected the upper breakpoints. Again, this is because of the cascading rule. Whatever we do on the mobile is only affecting the mobile because there's nothing below it. Back on the mobile, let's scroll down and see what other changes we need to make. Down in our services section, the text has gotten a little smaller. So let's click on our services, go over to the inspector panel, and make it a little larger, like 19. Now we can put it back on one line by grabbing the text box and stretching it to the right. For the individual items, instead of just scaling up the text, let's see what else we can do. Let's open up the Layers panel, find our repeater, and select the first item. Let's grab the bottom of the first item and stretch it to make it larger. Again, because this is a repeater, it's made the changes for every item. Now, let's select the stack. We'll switch the stack from horizontal to vertical. And then we can adjust the spacing. Now, by selecting the text itself, we can adjust the sizing of that alone. Back in the inspector panel, let's make it 12. Now, let's stretch the stack to the right to fill the entire space. And then we'll align to center. Now we can adjust the item sizing again to remove any empty space. Once again, if we check out the tablet, we'll see that it is not affecting this repeater. Back in the mobile, let's scroll the rest of our site and see how it looks. The last thing that we need to fix is our team section. First, we'll start with the text. Let's do the same as the section above by changing the title from 12 pixels to 19. Then we'll stretch the text box to the right. For this repeater, it's already set to cards, so for mobile, it'll be better as a list. Let's click into the cell until we select the repeater. Now, we can switch it from cards to list. If we need to adjust any sizing, we can do the same as before. Let's select the first item and stretch it out. This will again make all the items the same size. Now, we can grab the container for the name and move it down. We can adjust the size of the text by selecting the text and changing it to 12. And doing the same with the bio text. We'll select the text and change it to 12. Now that we've finished our mobile, let's jump back to desktop and view it all together. From the desktop breakpoint, let's go to the top right and click Preview. And grab the resize handles to stretch it larger. We can see how the site is scaling. By continuing to scale it down, we go from the desktop breakpoint, now to the tablet breakpoint, and into the mobile breakpoint. Up at the top, we can switch back to desktop and scroll down to see a different part of the site. From our services section, let's grab the resize handles and scale down from desktop to tablet and to mobile. And we can scroll up and down to take a look at the entire site. And that's it. Congratulations, your site is now complete, fully responsive and optimized for all screen sizes. Before you submit your site for certification, I have one final optional lesson for you. In the lesson, you'll discover 10 additional features that can help you take your studio site to the next level. Feel free to add any of these enhancements before submitting or submit your site as it is now. The choice is yours. When ready, I'll see you in our final lesson.